Happy 4th of July, by the way.
Yeah, and to you.
Yeah,
We're probably gonna have a small crowd here today.
no worries.
Well, so the community is just getting started. I don't know how much John filled you in from last.
He did.
I don't because he and I had a great conversation for like an hour and a half,
Yeah.
and then you guys showed up to last Tuesday's workshop.
Yes.
And then I spent probably 45 minutes or an hour or so chatting with him after that just to get his feedback.
Absolutely. Yeah, we talked extensively after the first call and after the video meeting session that we had last Tuesday. So we've combed a lot, and we've put into practice a lot of the things that we talked about. All positive across the board. We really appreciated the feedback that you guys had, and it was very insightful. It was great to hear from the different personality types. There's just different backgrounds and different flavors to the advice that comes in, and it's all value added in my eyes. So, and in our eyes, really, for that matter. Yeah, we had a lot to chew on after that, so that was great. So we really appreciated our time there, and I understand that as this community is growing, there's going to be great perspective to pull from other people that join in. I did tell John that while he was there, I would love to jump in, and he was on all board. So I've got a couple ideas of depending on how you wanted to run this session, completely up to you. And I had some ideas, some threads to pull on if that would be appropriate.
But for sure.
Really, however you want to take the wheel on this one, I'm just happy to be here.
Well, I think you should certainly take advantage of the fact that we are moving slowly into building this community. We spent the first part of the year, sort of end of last year, and things always slow down in December, but end of last year, and then we took January, February timeframe and a little bit into March to figure out what the community might look like, and then added a bunch of content in there. And I needed a place. I launched the community because I really wanted a place to put my experience, expertise, all the things that I run across.
Absolutely.
And also to bring a lot of people together to just do a lot of good in the world. And then we started recording. I think we recorded 4 weeks with just faculty members just talking,
sure,
just to get the mood right. And then the goal for the workshop is that folks like you or whatever's hanging around in the community, questions that people have, or somebody like you who wants to just kind of sit in the hot seat and just bat around an idea. It's the workshop. Hey, everybody bring your tools, bring your beer. Let's come to the workshop, work it through. And you'll leave with something half made, some skills that you didn't have before, or you might leave with something that's, hey, I got my beta ready to rock and roll. Can everybody try this?
Or
that's
homework.
The goal for this.
Yeah. Or you just go back. That's what we did is out of the last conversation, we took a bunch of notes behind the scenes, just, as we were receiving feedback and discussing in depth. And we took that back and it just turned into to-do lists and checklists and just a plan of action at that point. So that's exactly what we're hoping to get out of it. We're happy to share our experience and the things that we have found success in, the things that we've struggled in, and just kind of future plans. Just because calibrating our compass on the front end is, God, you can walk a long way in the wrong direction and you're just not anywhere where you need to be. So we appreciate any kind of course correction, which can come in any form to include video sessions like this. So we're very grateful.
That's awesome. Well, our goal also, one of the things just from a process standpoint is we record all of these, and then the segments get clipped up and get dropped onto social media to bring more people into the community. And then the idea is that anybody can go back to these sessions and really glean anything they need from it. What's also cool, I think, part of this amazing soup I think that we're creating is that if you're working on a concept, then you get more exposure for sales as well.
Absolutely.
And there's no gatekeeping on that. We don't I'm a big believer in giving back. I'm a big believer in the old adage, the rising tide lifts all boats.
Absolutely.
So
Yes.
everybody should go as far and as fast as they want and can.
Mm.
And I think that's inspirational for other folks. So happy to have you here.
Well, you definitely strike a different tone when you come across people that are pursuing the same kind of initiative. I mean, you find this community of people that are like, you know what, like I could take a conventional route, or I could try to create value in an entirely uncharted capacity. And then when you hear someone, your ears perk up, and you're like, okay, like you think like I do, like I like this, and you just lean in, and there's so much to share there, and you just really want to support them in any capacity. So I do understand that, because it's like a tractor beam. I get pulled right in when I cross paths, because it's such a rare opportunity to run into somebody that has that kind of a an agenda in life. Just, okay, let's take this convention and we'll throw it on the ground and break it, and then see what comes out. And okay, what pieces can I put back together and in what way? So we're very I totally understand the allure of trying to give back to the community, like you were saying. This is a great resource for us, and I mean, before we've ever established or any kind of credibility in this front, it also creates it feels a lot less lonely, you'd say. There's
Right.
yes.
It is a lonely life being an entrepreneur.
I think there's a quote that me and John have kicked around a couple of times, especially on long nights. I think Elon Musk had said it's like chewing on broken glass and staring to the abyss, especially when you don't even know if like the end is certain at all. Like, you don't know if you're going to make it. It's just a lot of a lot of lonely rowing. So but yeah, so all right,
dig in. What threads do you want to pull on from the previous conversations? What's on your mind?
So I think what I can do up front is just kind of talk through what we've done the last week in response to the conversations that we had.
Nice.
And then another area I'd like to dig into, just because it's nice to have a little bit of a captive audience here. So I got accepted into NYU Stern. The way that and how that's going to relate to me and John and our business ventures. I did this intentionally. We both knew that I was going to try to get into a business school and overlap it and run it concurrently with during the time we were building this company. And I think that there's a tremendous amount of opportunity that comes from that, from the networks that you can plug into. But as I'm in the next couple of weeks, I've got to get course registration finalized. And I'm going to be doing it remotely. It's really hybrid, but I'd love to kind of pick your brain based on your current assessment of having a finger on the pulse of entrepreneurship right now. What areas of study you think would be beneficial for somebody that's kicking off as an entrepreneur and starting a company in the here and now? Because I have some leeway into the material and focus areas of my MBA. And because like someone giving this advice 10 years ago would not have had a conversation about AI or like these things that are just actively emerging right now. And we're trying to just strike where the iron is hot. I know it's not like I get my MBA like this, it's going to be a few years, but at the same time, we're going to have a live test subject to work on with a lot of skin in the game. And I have a vested interest to make sure it succeeds. It is our goal. It is our mission and purpose to make this thrive and stay alive. So any way to capitalize on it from an academic perspective, I'm very open to kind of exploring that if that's something we can maybe talk to. I know you're not familiar. You may not be familiar with NYU Stern specific curriculum, but more so just areas of study that you think like this is hot right now. You can get sharp on, this is going to benefit you. Is this those kinds of conversations? That's okay.
There's a lot of ways to go with that.
Yeah, but we can start with just
opinions.
Sure. We can start with just kind of the things we did last week, if that's a good starting point, or whatever you'd like.
Well, the topic you want to cover is sitting on your mind is how to focus or what to focus on during getting your MBA so as to make your entrepreneurial project better.
Sure.
Sure. Still down?
More or less, yeah. If there's something that is an emerging area, that having those skills in the here and the now would make you more competitive as an entrepreneur, what might
Well,
those things be? And then I can explore from a course perspective where I might find that.
yeah. Okay. Well, let me cover this then in the best I know how.
Mhm.
And this is just my thinking, right?
Sure.
I am I'm an expert at dropping out of college. I've dropped out of college, I think 5 times.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. Because I couldn't suffer going through the classes.
Mm.
I just couldn't.
Mm.
The reason I couldn't is because the classes move very slowly,
Mm.
and entrepreneurship or business moves very quickly.
Okay.
The things that schools teach, and this is just my opinion, and my experience. The things that the schools teach are fundamental in nature. They're sort of foundational. Whereas the things that you experience in the real world move much quicker. Everything that has been taught in a school has already been done in the real world.
Okay.
So school is always lagging.
Okay.
They've been trying to change that by merging entrepreneurship into schools, and then schools to get more funding and all sorts of stuff will encourage people to make projects and do research and get patents. And then sometimes the school incubates these projects and even owns them commercially in some cases, depending on the school. Of course they do.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. That's how all the grant research that these instructors have to do. It's proprietary. It's all intellectual property of the universities that started it.
So it's a business. School is an interesting business. And I'd want to say that there's no correlation between being good in school and being a good entrepreneur. The vast majority of successful, we'll call them success in terms of wealth, size of company. The vast majority of those people didn't go to school, or they dropped out. Some of them dropped out in high school.
Sure.
So the indicator of success is twofold. It's the leading indicator, not the lagging indicator. The lagging indicator is money and size company and longevity of company, all sorts of stuff. But the leading indicator of success is sticking to something, just sticking to it, going further than everybody else, just because you choose to go further. You just don't stop.
Just doing the things that everyone else is unwilling to do, and exercising discipline in that capacity.
It's like the military mindset of as soon as your body's tired, you probably got like 70% more in the tank, because it's the rest of it's just your mindset.
Yeah.
And so entrepreneurs just go further. They have a ignorant optimism in their mind.
Successful,
they just can't escape.
Entrepreneurs do that.
Well, all entrepreneurs do it.
Sure.
But the other the thing that has to go along with that is the most successful entrepreneurs learn to listen to what's going on around them. And that could be that they listen for feedback and make changes. They listen for what's going on in the world and go to opportunity. They take a lot of advice, essentially. Elon Musk takes a lot of advice. He asks questions, for instance, on Twitter. So he's got this, he has some stick-to-itiveness that he's just going to do this because that he thinks it's the right thing to do. So he buys Twitter. The money is not the issue for him. Free speech is. Okay, great, fine. So he does this whole Twitter thing in the face of all sorts of people who would tell him this is a terrible idea. And you would never learn this in a textbook. What he's doing, where he goes in and he trims like 80% of the staff. Nobody with an MBA did that.
No, there's nothing doctrinal about that whatsoever.
in some ways it's a terrible business decision because
Mhm.
he's lost a massive amount of market share, and or not market share of value in the
Mhm.
in from a stock market value of his investment.
Mhm.
He killed the value of the short term, the lagging indicators, which
Mhm.
again, this is why the money doesn't mean anything. The lagging indicator, which is your value of in the marketplace,
Mhm.
um, it's going to take some time to catch up to his idea
Mhm.
of how he wants to shape this company. But he's looking at it and say, hey, this is losing a bunch of money, and
Mhm.
I stand for something bigger than money anyhow. So if I lose money, whatever. That's not
Mhm.
something you'd learn in business school, where it's like, yeah, if you lose money because you're standing on your principles,
Sure.
it's like nobody teaches that.
Sure. I mean, his adherence to convention would have robbed the world of SpaceX and Tesla and all these other companies that
Oh yeah, for
were
sure.
were entering saturated markets, or markets that were deemed to be impossible to enter without government funding. And it just, if you approached it from a conventional standpoint,
Yeah,
and he just
that
changed it. So I
and
100% on
that's
board
where
everything you're
schools
saying.
and entrepreneurship
Yeah.
sort of are at odds with one another, because disruption is all about something that hasn't been done before, and yet
Sure.
school teaches things that have been done before.
Sure. Um,
So
so
there's a challenge in there just fundamentally. So I
mhm.
would say that one of the best things you can do is just keep it in its place. Learn the foundational things. So like
Mhm.
if do you know how to read a balance sheet or a P&L?
Yeah.
Richard Branson didn't know how to read a balance sheet or a P&L until he was into his 60s or something ridiculous. And he has 400 companies. So, and a billionaire. And he didn't know how to read a balance sheet and P&L because he didn't need to.
Mhm. Well, you can have
He
somebody
had
who's
people,
trained on doing that. Exactly. Yeah. You can
he invited
delegate.
exactly, he invited information, then he used his best information,
Mhm.
but then he had some principles that he stood on,
Mhm.
which is from a branding perspective and whatnot are really important for
Mhm.
for all the virgin brands.
Mhm.
But he didn't learn any of that in school. He's
Mhm.
dyslexic, and he actually has a really hard time and had a really hard time in school.
Mhm.
So there's there is something to just keeping school in its place. You're going to learn the fundamentals, but you won't learn how it really works until you're just doing it. And
So
even then, it's going to change faster than your school will ever change.
sure. One thing I would just add some context and why I wanted to go to get an MBA, because I do think that that's important. I mean, other than just, I think it's, you're very clear about your stance on school, in this sense, and not to degrade the value that can be extracted from it, but I understand that it's the flash to bang on it is too great for you to learn something and apply it in an actively responsive capacity, right? So I do understand that completely. The reason why I wanted to go to MBA school, for me, leaving the military in the capacity that I did, I medically retired out, injuries sustained while in the service, ended up leaving 100% disabled. But what that did is it qualified me for this veteran rehabilitation and employment program. And this
Yeah.
program, I mean, they're paying $159,000 a school, and they're
Yeah.
going to pay for my housing while I do it. So this combined with disability ended up tallying up to enough money to go full time and not have to go back to a conventional school. So I picked a
Right.
part-time school intentionally that would take longer, so that the week to week course load, or the workload, would be less. I'd be receiving housing pay. I'd have my tuition fully paid for, all supplies covered, right? So if in the short term, I mean, I just got this approved between our conversation and last. I mean, I've been working on it for about a year, but the actual official, like, yep, we're signing off on it now, happened in the last week. So going to NYU is now like a certainty for me. And I'm, as with anything else, trying to explore what opportunities do exist. I do know that NYU has a tremendously in-depth entrepreneurial support program. There's entire divisions of it. They've got pitched competitions. They've got venture capitalist firms. I mean, they want to grow these things because the network feeds itself. You talk about the business standpoint, absolutely. However, if someone's able to connect in and be successful by tapping into these resources that would otherwise be exclusive to people that within that community, um, everybody seems to work out for everybody in the end. Now, for me, like, this is just the means to the end for me. I'd love to sharpen skills if they've got. I have a friend of mine that went through the similar program, different MBA program. However, it was the University of Indiana Kelley, which is the #1 online MBA program in the country, exclusively online. Just because they got in years ago and they've kind of refined it, so they've shortened that gap tremendously. Following COVID, the impact on in-person attendance affected from talk about, like P&L sheets. These universities took a huge hit from a lack of students showing up in person, deferring, et cetera. And they had to evolve to meet the new landscape. So you started seeing these top 10 schools that would scoff at the idea of keeping their classes or be able to even get a degree online. I know MIT, publishes all of their classes, but you can't get a degree by just watching it, right? So a lot of top 10 universities have now added these programs. Because of their infancy, there's going to be some growing pains, undoubtedly, but they do have the resources to quickly accelerate and kind of close those gaps to make the program, I guess, more fruitful for somebody that is remote. So I threw a dart on a wall. I wasn't sure if I'd be able to get into NYU. I'm happy I did. It's
the value is not directly related to being an entrepreneur. Sure. Because I think the case is made. Business moves faster than education. Absolutely. It always has, and it always will, because education teaches those things which have already been done. Lessons
learned. Past tense.
Right. Which is why I say they're foundational. So use them, just keep them in their place. These are foundational items, which does not mean they're law or truth. It just means that that's what's been done. Great. Doesn't mean that you can't break out of that mold. And that's where the a lot of college graduates, and a lot of college graduates will come into the real world and they'll be like, well, I learned how to do this. Things like, that's neat, but that's not actually how it happens.
Sure.
It's how it has happened for some people. So just keep it in that space. The advantage that you have by going to a top business school is focus on conversations you would never be able to have otherwise. So the fact that because you're smart by association, which is totally a thing, right? So you're smart by association, which means you can have conversations that other people won't be able to have. So find those people and have the conversations. Back to this idea that good entrepreneurs just learn from people. You're in a good room to be in. Number 2 is resources that you will not be able to easily get on your own. A lot of stuff can be easily learned, like a P&L and a balance sheet. You can learn to do that in the real world. You don't need an MBA for that. You don't need a bachelor for that, or an associate's, and they will spend Gad's amount of time teaching all sorts of shit, which you'll never care about, because eventually you're going to have an accountant who will look at some of this stuff and they'll know the nuanced parts of these things. And you'll because there's also a difference between there's a difference between accounting from a tax standpoint and managerial accounting, which is how we're going to use our numbers, which again, that P&L and that balance sheet are lagging indicators of what's already happened. So in the real world, you're going to be using something different anyhow, and then double checking it with lagging indicators. So that's just kind of an example of the stuff that you'll learn it differently in your own business, in your own space, and you'll build your own tools to understand your business and predict the future that business school is probably not going to teach you. But the resources, there are certain resources which you probably won't be able to get access to easily on your own. So if back to this, your other question, which is, what might be some things I could focus on? If you get into or associate yourself around any machine learning type stuff, any AI type stuff, there's going to be a a significant amount of research done, because now it's sort of been flipped. So you might be able to get into a place where somebody's researching these things and pushing the envelope, whereas entrepreneurs, sometimes they're using tools that have already been developed. You know what I'm saying? So like the people are coming out with all this AI stuff, and it's really built on top of tools that have already been released. So they'll be like, hey, I'll introduce a new app. It's like, yeah, but you're using, let's say, Chat GPT in the back end. You're using that as a service provider.
Sure.
So did you really build the tool? Well, kind of. You adapted this existing tool.
Mm-hmm.
In education, they might, if you're part of any sort of research type stuff, or get into those people who are like really pushing the envelope, who just have time to spin on these ideas, and they've got massive amount of computing power or whatever. You might be able to get into some of those rooms where people are doing a bunch, just, students playing around with stuff, researching, because that doesn't need to have an end game. Whereas in the quote unquote real world, there really has to be an end game that you're pushing for. There might be investors or something like that. You're trying to solve a certain thing. Whereas in research, you're just kind of playing around with it. So go to the sandbox, play around, have the conversations that you won't be able to have, because you wouldn't otherwise be able to have, because you wouldn't be associated with this top business school, which is really just back to this idea of, who connect, make sure you keep your connections healthy.
Sure.
Because in the end, it's all in who you know.
Sure. I mean, I think that's very sage advice, because I think that to address the more short term or the extremely small half-life of how fast things are evolving right now, I think my guess would be that if there's a opportunity to, if there is some kind of curriculum that promotes, I guess you'd say, business agility, because right now, while these tools may still be in a research capacity, being sharpened and developed in a greater capacity, the tools that do exist right now for an entrepreneur's perspective provide an immense amount of opportunity to capitalize on, cut corners in areas where you need to hire people to do X, Y, and Z. You can shrink your staff requirements. You can increase work output. I mean, when we're building our business, on the back end, the SEO development, we knew that in order to kind of score higher from Google Hummingbird's analytics, we'd have to have a more robust back end when it comes to SEO. It's a lot of longhand typing in an old capacity, and like in a previous capacity, you just start generating articles and you build content and you add depth so that your website looks more established. And we just blazed through that with AI, and we used actually multiple AI systems that exist now to correct and improve the outputs of each system. So, certain AI programs that are better with grammar, certain AI programs that do better when it comes to content creation, and then running it through these systems that are designed to kind of scrape it and see how original these articles would score, because there is a cutoff point. If it's just AI trash coming out, it scores poorly, because they can tell that it's been written by AI, and just finding out how to get that percentile close to 100 as possible, where it looks like you did do it longhand. I mean, there's ways to leverage tools that exist right now, and that's what we're trying to do as well. And I hope that in the academic realm, there exists some kind of a venue for that. I know that it's like, okay, how many different ways can you use a knife? It's the simple blunt instrument, not blunt, but simple instrument, but you can cook with it. You can cut things with it. I mean, it's just your creativity is the limiter. So those tools that exist right now, I hope to explore those because I think agility directly fights stagnation and is the difference between, an idea becoming a reality or just or staying a dream in that sense.
Well, agility is a mindset and is learned through experience. I don't think agility can be taught, quite honestly. I think that exists in a person or it doesn't exist. It's like resilience. You only learn resilience. You could read about resilience all you want, but you only learn resilience by having to be resilient.
Mm.
And it's, well, you were in the military, right? You went through basic training.
Yeah, 12 years active duty, Ranger school, that
Yeah.
stuff. Yeah.
Right. If you read a book about what it's like to be in the military versus being in the military, that's like studying entrepreneurship versus being an entrepreneur.
Mm-hmm.
Two different things. In
Reading
fact,
the book versus writing the book.
Ironically, this is my mug, incubator.edu at HCHS. A couple times a year, I teach at a local high school. I teach a couple different sections of entrepreneurship.
Mm-hmm.
And this is my mug because apparently I've been a member doing that since 2018.
Oh, nice.
So the interesting thing is, when I go into that classroom, everybody has an interest in entrepreneurship. And this past year, two people already had businesses and they were selling stuff. And then they were going to the entrepreneurship class. So one girl had already been making jewelry and she'd been selling thousands of dollars per year of jewelry. And she learned a couple of things in marketing where I told her it's all about how the person wants to view themselves when they're buying jewelry. So you really have to think about your words and your images. And then there was somebody else who was selling, like, what were they selling? Clothing of some sort to skateboarders and that type of stuff. And had a little side gig going on. Everybody else, they had dreams of all sorts of stuff that they wanted to do, and they were learning. And what they were learning was, your ideas suck. And just get used to the idea that you're in love with it and nobody else is. So be willing to pivot off of your idea,
Mm-hmm.
which is not something that a lot of people are not willing to accept. Your first idea is probably your worst idea.
Mm-hmm.
It's stuff like that. Or, it's okay that when you say this, when people ask, who's your buyer? And they're like, everybody. That's not true. None of that is true. There's going to be people who hate your idea.
Sure.
It doesn't mean there aren't people who love your idea. So they're just hearing things that when you get into after you've lived a bit of life, you're like, oh, that's true. Like, whatever.
So from an agility standpoint, I mean, you're saying that part of that is also, it's not only just being able to pivot to the opportunity that arises, but to be able to pivot off of something that you're emotionally invested in. To meet the needs that exist, at 10 o'clock this morning, it was X, and at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, it's Y, and you got to be able to pivot to Y now because X is stale at this point. So John and I actually pivoted off of our original idea, and we had it down all the way down to the penny. We really drilled all the way down because before we were going to pull the trigger on it, we wanted to make sure our ducks were in a row.
Yeah.
And the answer at the end of that, like that like quest, if you will, to get down and say, okay, like how realistic is this, was not what we were hoping for. And it was a like, okay, let's like clear off our whiteboards and just start mapping out a new path. Where does the blue sky exist? It was sunny and blue sky now, and then it's funny because it only validated it's a kind of a funny story. So we were hoping to actually go into the energy drink business, and it's very stagnant. And there's plenty of examples of people entering saturated markets that were immensely successful, despite what you would think on paper, like, okay, there's just too much competition. You need to be like a titan or you're going to get washed out.
Yeah.
And still they're successful. However, for the most part, we were looking to find, okay, well, where's the blue sky exist within that market? And it originated from us exploring the question, okay, who's our audience? What do they need? What's inadequately being addressed or not being addressed right now?
Mm-hmm.
What survives that line of questioning? And we landed on like a healthy energy drink, basically something that just abandoned some of the conventional things that you'd find, and they were cutting corners and focus on creating a formula that actually would promote, would approach for more health conscious, would appeal to health conscious professionals. And when you get down to it, if you're buying it in small amounts or you're trying to sell it online, the volume, I mean, of shipping liquids, storing it, the actual dimensional requirements in a housing capacity, all work against you. So it becomes a numbers game. And if you're small, it's hard to play the numbers game because you can't just say, okay, well, I'm going to buy 1 million of these, and we won't make a profit until 2 million, but I'm going to eat the cost on the front end. So when we got down to it, we were realizing that it was the way we were trying to sell it. You would either have to somehow convince people to buy like $6 or $7 an energy drink, or have them buy like 24 packs of something they've never heard of. It's all dangerous, all dangerous conversation. So we pivoted off of that, and you really do get to see the behind the scenes of like why Amazon makes a lot of money. It's not from sales, it's from the sellers. Like they make so much money off of the people selling on Amazon. I mean, it's 50% of the profit margin for most, if not more. So, and they've got their logistics down so tight that it really doesn't cost them that amount. Like their overhead costs are tiny compared to what they're actually pulling from each transaction. Every time you touch something, it's fascinating to learn, but it was enough red flags for us to pivot off of it. And it sucked because we were so far down the rabbit hole for this. And God, it had to have been within 6 months, maybe it was like a year. The Rock came out with his healthy energy drink, and of course, he's a titan within whatever industry he touches. And he came out swinging, and it's like he just posts a handheld with no production value whatsoever, him standing in front of a refrigerator with his, I think it's called Koa, or no, it's whatever his energy drink was, and that's all it took. It didn't require no production crew, nothing, and that's all it took, and it just took off. Wow, we almost stepped on that landmine. We would have gotten crushed in that environment, and we had to pivot off of it and meet the needs that, well, one, that were realistic for us, but meet the needs of where the market, like be able to provide to a market that had demand, that was easier to get into, I guess, less saturated. So yes, I do know from a little bit of scar tissue, not as much as I'm sure that you have, but a little bit of scar tissue on my end for pivoting off of something that you like, that was your baby for a while.
Yeah, it's a learned skill to be able to do that, and life. I think there's you opened up with balance, right? And I wrote an article a long time ago about work-life balance and how bullshit that is.
So I said relative balance.
here's how I look at it. Two things. Number one, this idea of balance is just be all in where you're at that moment. So like right now, I'm here, I'm all in. It's not that I don't have other things going on in my life. I do, but they're not in this moment. So I'm going to be all in here. In that case, the teeter-totter is like all in here. However, from a macro standpoint, it's a lot more like a pizza. I don't want just sausage on my pizza. I don't want just cheese. I want a balance of the flavors that I want as part of my pizza. And that's what I think healthy entrepreneurship is like. It's a pizza. You got to have some sort of base, and that can't be your business, because your business is going to change. You might have to change your business. So it really can't, your crust, and your crust cannot be your business. It's got to be something that survives that. Your crust is most likely your relationships. Right. I mean, the other sage advice, and I didn't make this up, is, I think Warren Buffett said it best. There's two decisions which will predict how successful you'll be in life. Number one, who you marry. So your significant other will predict. It's your strongest predictor of the success of your life. Number two is what you do for work. Those two things.
Mm-hmm.
And I do know that when we talk to old folks, if you ask them, in fact, they've done research on this. The longest study ever of people and their success in life. And I can't remember, I'll lose the specifics on this, but they followed these people for 70 years or something like that.
Oh,
and kept coming back and studying them, like
yeah.
What makes a successful life? It was the quality of their interpersonal relationships. Because that enabled them to be resilient. So when the business came falling down around them, perhaps times changed, stuff outside of them, bad decision making, whatever it was, their core stability of I have people around me who care for me and I care for them, that wasn't rocked. What you won't find in most business schools, or, and this just broadly, you know this to be true because you've lived some life, but younger folks who get sucked into this world where th're like, I'm going to be an entrepreneur, I'm going to make a lot of money, I'm not going to work for anybody. It's like, that's not how it works. You're going to be an entrepreneur and you're going to work for everybody. You're going to work for yourself. You're going to work for your loved ones. You're going to work for your employees. You're going to work for your customers. You're going to work for everybody. Everybody wants a piece of you, and they're going to want a different piece of you. That's very different from getting a job where I work for my boss and I work for me and my people. And to some degree I'm held in these confines. These are the limits. This is the room you're in. This is what you do. These are your responsibilities. You don't have to think about all the stuff out there. Somebody else can talk to all those people out there. Right? Not an entrepreneur. Nope. Everybody's knocking on your door. I want this. I want that.
At all hours of the day. It's not a 9 to 5. It's
right. Which, back to the idea of pizza, it's like, well, you can't let that become your crust because it will be the only thing. That crust will keep growing and you won't have enough toppings. Like it will be unmanageable. So instead you're like, no, what the crust is this, and then we're going to put cheese on top of that, or sauce, and then we're going to put cheese, and then we're going to add on these other things. And it's only going to take up a certain amount of space because it has to, or it will take up everything. And in the ultimate end, this is subject to change, whereas you got to figure out what's not subject to change. So, I don't know, wrapping all that together, build your life like a pizza, figure out what the toppings are and keep them in proportion. And also know that not everybody likes the same type of pizza. So your pizza doesn't have to look like mine. I do not like ham and pineapple, and some people will argue with me that that's somehow pizza. I don't think it's pizza. So, do your thing. So keep everything in proportion. It has to be whatever you decide. And then grab the fundamentals where you can, but know that they are, know that the things that are going to make you successful are in your mind. They aren't necessarily the skills. If you're smart enough to learn skills, you can learn any skill, most likely. And it's really your mindset of, I'm going to do this because I want to, and this is the way it's going to be. And, then experience will tell you whether it's a good idea or not, because sometimes the masses or even school will tell you it's not a good idea, when in fact, it probably is a pretty good idea.
If I've one quick question, just, and this is, I've found my own way to kind of navigate this path. However, I'd be interested to hear your take on it. Because it speaks specifically to what you're talking about here, where you have some audience and some, whether it's academia or if it's friends and family, even saying they may have a different perspective on what is and isn't, and what path you should and shouldn't take. How as an entrepreneur, when you've got your immediate circles of people that are, despite being in your immediate circle, still are still vastly, there's still a tremendous amount of distance between them and the problems that you're working on, but they're close to you emotionally and relationally, right? So they have a vested interest in your success, and they're trying to steer you on all these off ramps that are conventional things that they know that they perhaps took in life. How do you maintain that crust on your pizza with for the people that love you, that want you to be happy and be successful, but are trying to toss water onto your fire, and you're trying to keep that lit and not let it like smoke out? Because I've crossed that personally. I was raised in my family was well educated, but they took a much more conventional path. My immediate family, and then my uncle has been starting and selling businesses his whole career, and he's incredibly successful. I mean, he killed it on the entrepreneurial side. So I do have both sides to kind of pull from. But when you have a conversation with your own parents, and they're like, "Wow, maybe you should think about doing this as well," and it's kind of like, you should put money under the mattress kind of approach. What advice would you give to somebody navigating that when it's coming from your own family?
It can be complicated, I'm sure.
Mm.
The one thing I would say is from a human or psychological perspective, everybody has a different need and definition of safety.
Mm.
Right? So I happen to know I am safe. As a human being, I am safe. This world is a playground. I don't have the same need for safety of stuff that somebody else has. So I'm willing to go play with my stuff. Whereas some people are like, nope, we're not playing with that. We're going to put it away and we're going to keep it locked up. It's like my grandparents used to have plastic on their couch.
Of course. Yes.
So
For a generational thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. It's like, I would never put plastic on my couch.
No.
What happens if long time ago, I bought this nice Audi Q7 and I was super happy about it. And my kids were like, "This is an amazing car." And I was like, guys, first of all, it's just metal and plastic and some upholstery, and it takes us from point A to point B. It is a nice car. Yes. Am I going to treat it with kid gloves? Not exactly, because I'm going to throw shit in the back, and what happens if that shit, rips up the upholstery or something like that, right? I trust that I'm just going to use this stuff. So the entrepreneur tends to have this, I'm just going to go out and play around and experiment. And if it wastes resources in trying because I wanted to experiment with it, fine. But some other people will look at that and go, "How dare you? You cannot do that. What are you thinking?" An entrepreneur. So I couple that with the idea that entrepreneurs are creators. We are creators. We want to go create. And I happen to know that every rule, that's not every rule. A lot of the rules that we live by were made up, and they're made up by people like you and me. So one day we all had to go to work to collect our paychecks, and it was demanded of us. And if we didn't show up at work, we weren't going to collect our paychecks. Right. And then 24 hours later, they were like, I'm going to need you to stay home, and I'm going to continue to pay you. And don't you dare go to work, or I'm going to arrest you and, hang you upside down, tar and feather you, and beat you with a stick. Don't you dare go to work.
No.
It's like, so what? Which, huh?
So you realize it's not this like time. It's not this. It is rules that are put into place to meet the needs of the moment, to keep things,
and everybody just keeps playing by them. Yep. And then they back them into education and say, these are the rules you need to play by, only until we say that's not. And And once you start viewing the world in that perspective, then you start seeing opportunities where other people just can't see those opportunities because their brains won't let them get out of safety, and safety are rules and regulations and the box, and that's okay. Those people work for entrepreneurs. And you don't want them, you don't want everybody kicking against the walls. You really don't. That's chaos.
Yeah.
Instead, you want to, if you feel it's in your heart to blaze a trail, fucking blaze the trail.
Yeah.
Like Liquid Death is that water that came out.
Yes, I have pictures of the branding, the packaging. When I saw it,
it's fucking water.
Yeah.
And then this whole thing, well, it's a little less carbonated and it's a little less, and it's an aluminum can. Like aluminum cans haven't been done before.
Sure.
It's just marketing. It's just,
I quite literally have a picture on there because I was like, for them to be able to break into the water market and be able to sell it at the price that they do, which it's not cheap, and for it to survive, to make it to retail and to be found everywhere, you had to blaze a trail. Despite 100%, I can't imagine the amount of like withering friendly fire they probably faced trying to get this thing to market from people, and even in their most immediate circles. I mean, you talk about, you look at this, you're like, how did that sell? But it does. And last November, the company was valued at $700 million. Yeah. And I believe there's probably a disproportionate amount of people who never thought it would live to see the day.
Oh, I'm certain they were told no countless numbers of times.
Yes.
My parents who are very successful have run a trucking company for 50 years. If you talk to my dad about this, he'd be like, that's asinine. Water. Why would you ever buy water like that? It's crazy. It's a complete waste of money. If you look at my daughter's nightstand right now, there is absolutely a Liquid Death bottle on it.
Wow. So it is definitely encouraging, because for every naysayer, when someone breaks through, it becomes a wild success story at that point. I mean,
you have to have naysayers.
Yes.
You believe in the I'm gonna lose my words here, but a curve. Everything happens in sort of a curve, right? So much so that you can plan your day based on statistics, right? So the extremes.
The standard deviation belt. Yeah, absolutely.
Right. The extremes, you can calculate extremes in any population. I've written software that calculates extremes and finds correlations and all sorts of shit. Now here's the really cool thing. For every person who absolutely loves you, for you to be in balance with the way the universe works, there's probably going to be somebody who absolutely hates you.
Sure.
And everything you stand for. And then there's going to be everybody in the middle who does not care. And you might have customers in there. They're like, one day they're like, yeah, okay, that's fine, I'll take that. And you might actually be able to drag them over onto the end where they're just like in love with you. However, in doing so, they might also go, that's crazy, you're nuts. People are people. Your parents could be here, your parents could be there, your parents could be there. They're just people. And maybe they live in a sense of safety. And the further you move from safety, whatever their definition of safety is, the more they think you're nuts.
Yeah, they're more risk adverse than I am, for sure. I mean, when I told my parents I was joining the Army, they had an opinion. When I told them I was going to jump out of planes for a living, they were like, had their opinion. And of course, they couldn't be any more supportive. So just in the long run, they trust that I'm making the right decisions. But they would be remiss if they didn't try to provide some kind of counsel and guidance as my parents. So I totally understand that. But it's definitely
my dad,
a disproportion. Go ahead.
Yeah. So my dad, he's now celebrating his 50th anniversary for his trucking company this year, right? It was more than a decade ago now. I was in my young 30s, maybe I was 30 years old, something like that. I had now owned a business that was at least at least 100% larger than his business.
Mhm.
And it was on the uptick, right? And I had blazed a trail, and they were always very supportive, but my dad, like kind of like your dad, he's always has an opinion.
Mhm.
At one of the best conversations I ever had with him, which was a defining moment for me and a defining moment for him. And I think every man gets this opportunity to be like, have this sort of conversation. He's standing in my office. His dad, he's like, Jason, really proud of you. Everything you're doing here, this is really great. But I'd never work for you. And I said, that's fine, Dad. I'd never hire you. And we
Wow.
moved on from that moment.
Yeah.
And we are great friends. And he asks me my opinion on things.
Mhm.
And I ask his opinion on things. And we just happen to know our places, that he's going to choose one path and I'm going to choose a different path. I didn't go into trucking because I couldn't handle the monotony of it.
Mhm.
I needed to go off and do other stuff, but I wrote software for his trucking company.
Mhm. Yeah. So that's definitely, I mean, your example coming from your own parents, I mean, that's definitely strikes a chord. I'm sure on the earlier stages of you building your company, before it was 100% bigger than his company at that point in time when this conversation occurred, the effect that it has on you is disproportionate. I mean, it's like, you know, for every one person that say, I don't know about that, right? But when it comes from like a family member, it's tenfold more of an effect. If you haven't made it yet, so to speak, the impact is like, there's no way that you can say that it doesn't hit you in the gut a little bit. And because I do value their opinion.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like I'm ready to run into that burning building and just take it on. Like I that's just how it's always been. And John and I both hold that mentality together, that it does help that we're both of like mind in that sense. You know, there's risk reward. Our risk tolerance is higher. We're willing to experiment, fail, and what we've had conversations about this, not to breathe life into the probability of failure, but it's like, God, even if, just say, because, you know, talk about statistics, it could happen. Even if it doesn't happen, the wealth of gold of experiences you can pull from this will only arm you to the teeth for the next thing you take on. I mean,
Right.
really, you just extract gold from failure. And if you can learn to fail well, like, there's really bad ways to fail and there's really good ways. There's better ways to fail. And you'd prefer not to fail, but God, if you can just learn from it and then take that, and you've just got this arsenal of tools now, and you go take on to your next task. I'm not going to step there, and there again, because those were all landmines. And now we're going this direction. And
well, probably a class that they should add to entrepreneurship curriculums is you build a project. You spend all week building a project with your team, and you're ready for the presentation. And then you rotate and crush each other's projects to death, just trample them under the feet, and then say, you have one more day to put it all back together. That's probably entrepreneurship. And if they don't teach that,
brilliant. That's
how
brilliant.
to not get pissed off with everybody in your life, how to not give up. Like, that's where a lot of entrepreneurs, you know, the vast majority of people who go through entrepreneurship classes do not become entrepreneurs because they learn the skill sets, but they just don't have the mindset. And that's where that's you know, coupling all this back together. The mindset of an entrepreneur is contrary to the way the most people, the mindset of a successful entrepreneur, it works differently than most people. And a lot of people will look at it and go, you're nuts. And it's fine. I get it. I probably am in some ways. But what I've learned is that all the rules are made up, and I just happen to be one of the people who wants to make the rules.
That's fantastic. It really is a great way to summarize it all. Because if you don't have the mentality, you won't get very far. That's for sure.
Yeah. And I also, you know, with that, you know, some rules shouldn't be remade. There are things I've learned from my dad, which I'm like, yep, I'm going to keep that. And then there's some things that I've just totally done differently, and that's the way it is.
Well, anything that's of value should be able to survive scrutiny. Because if it doesn't, then does it need to be revisited? I mean, it's even opinion. I mean, take it from a social context. even your opinion on a subject is built upon whatever framework you have, the data points you have available to you at that time. And if you're
Yep.
met with new ones, just like a business, hey, retail movie rentals is not a thing anymore. I'm sorry, you got to pivot. Welcome Netflix, right? Like you have to be able to survive that scrutiny. And if it doesn't, then okay, where's the recalibrate your compass, and what path do you now walk? So, yeah.
Yes. All right. Well, we're at the end of the official workshop time frame. I'm happy to continue on and discuss some more of your other stuff, since it's we're the only two people here, if you like.
No, that would be wonderful.
Okay.